Hello and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. It is Friday and we have KSA. We appreciate your patience. In the last couple months, we have often had the schedule of this disrupted by life, but we are back. And as promised, we have
Yay!
Casey here to talk about our most recent few episodes, which have been kind of heavy for our girl Shade.
And delightfully chaotic.
Oh yes, very chaotic. No, this has been a really fun arc. We did more recording last night, so we're ahead of you as viewers. But I have very much enjoyed our jaunt into the Feywild, as I usually do. Um,
Same, same. I always love it when we visit the Feywild in whatever campaign we're in.
um, okay, before we get into Feywildy questions, Mia has a question. Can you tell us how old Shade is and how her age as a shifter relates to the age of the other player characters? And I don't know
Um,
if you can.
right. I will attempt to. I probably should have looked at this question and done the math before recording, but here we are. Um, when we started the campaign, I had Shade at 15, and um, from what I read, shifters tend to mature more quickly than other characters, and so putting her at 15, I had envisioned her at um, 17, 18 in the equivalents to them. And so, how long has the campaign been going? Um, in my head, it's
um,
2 years, but
well, did you imagine her at 15 when we started the story back in the Black Wheel Company? Because if
yes,
that's the
yeah, when they
case, then
escape.
it's been about 2.5 years. So yeah,
Okay,
she'd be um 17
so she'd be
ish.
17 now, and early
Hmm.
20s is how I picture her um, age equivalents
Hmm.
to human age equivalents.
Cool. And then, of course, we dropped the bombshell that she's actually a kitsune, and that just throws all such equations out the
Right.
window. Because how old is
Is
she
thousands
actually?
of years old or negative years old or.
Yeah, it's all over the place. Emily asks, would Shade have kissed Ari if she had known it would result in a gossip mill?
um, I think so. I, Shade doesn't love to talk about herself, but she isn't. She doesn't care what other people think.
Hmm.
Um, it it bothers her a little bit that there is attention on her. It's not what they're talking about. It's that like, ah, people are noticing me. Like in her mind,
Mm-hmm.
she just walks around completely unnoticed all of the time. And so
Right.
to be met with the idea that, oh no, people notice and are discussing it. Um, the fact that it's about the kiss is not what's bothersome to her.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um, it's just the fact that like, ah, they see me.
Mm-hmm.
Gross.
Awesome. And then a follow up from Emily. Given that if she went into politics, she'd be the subject of even more gossip, to put it lightly, has this experience made Shade more or less interested in pursuing the politics of Stormreach, or has she not thought about that?
um, Shade is pragmatic. Um, and so she has thought about that. Um, and and I think where she has landed currently is that she would, if she were to go into politics herself, then she recognizes that there are things that would have to change about the way that she interacts with people. Um, and she would have to get over being in the spotlight. Like if
Hmm.
people don't know you, then they can't. fear you slash respect you. You know, obviously they're the
Hmm.
same in Shade's eyes.
Sure.
I think her ideal situation would be having the ear of somebody that is politically strong so that she could remain in the shadows while also still having influence over the politics.
Hmm. Okay. Cool. Uh, Emily then turns on me. Philip, how dare you?
It's a good question.
Um, I respond with the motto of the British Special Air Service: "Who dares wins." Um,
A very brazen response.
uh huh. Hey, they're talking about it. I'm just saying, in the very very small metric of our show, the most recent episode had more views before the watch party than is usual. So if
Oh,
I've made you mad,
interesting.
apparently you're watching.
This
No,
is the lesson y'all are teaching him.
yeah. Yeah, you're teaching me to
Oh
do more of
no.
this. Um More to the point, how dare I, presumably being how dare I kidnap River. Um
Yes.
a lot of that was so I knew Eric was going to be missing for a bit because he's directing a show at his community theater and that just takes up all of his nights. And so I
Very
kind
cool.
of started to think, oh yeah, they're doing the Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's going to be really cool. Um, and so I started to kind of think, what could I do with just two players? And so I had kind of this notion it would be cool to take Pog and Shade into the Feywild. And then I had like some very tiny little notes, like I wanted them to meet the Forest Queen. That would be cool. We're at a stage in the campaign where that doesn't feel too soon, and I know that's been a big thing for Shade. Um, and some opportunities for Pog to be heroic because Pog likes to be heroic, and the Feywild is a great place for that. And so just some very very broad notes, but I needed them to go into the Feywild without stopping to get Ari. And I've already stolen Ari a few times, and so that felt like it would just get repetitive that I keep dragging Ari off somewhere. And so, but I had always intended there to be some sort of consequence to what happened with River. And so, as when Eric told me just a couple hours ahead of time that he wasn't going to be able to be there because he had family requirements that were obviously more important. I started trying to think, okay, how do the consequences of River get there? Who would come to try to get River back? And I went through a few different iterations of this, and I had some ideas of like the Mother Dryad trying to recapture River and sending agents, or some sort of like Feywild time variance authority whose job is to defend the story, and things like that. I went through a bunch of silly ideas, um, and then at some point in the 2 hours between when Eric let me know and when we sat down to record, I just thought, why not just do Jabberwocky? And so I decided, okay, River gets captured by something from Jabberwocky. Okay, it's a Bandersnatch because it's got the word snatch in it. Like, so grab someone. Um, and then I looked around at a bunch of different, like, I just did a Google image search of that and looked at what different, because of course, Lewis Carroll doesn't describe Bandersnatch in the poem. And so looking through different versions of what it looked like, and I settled on a particularly bizarre one. It was just like this cat with ape-like hands and feet that can grab, and real strange creature. I went with that, and then just came up with the name of an archfey without really having any information about that archfey when I sat down, because I was confident I wouldn't need it the first session. So I didn't need to know who the Laughing Lord was immediately, but so that's more or less why I dared. Um, it's the second part of Emily's question. How long have you planned to drop the two bombshells? River apparently needing to return to her story to fix the Feywild, and the Forest Queen having no knowledge of Shade's mark. As to the first one, I always intended River being pulled out of that story to really screw up the Feywild in some way. Um, I didn't necessarily know what form that would take, and some of the conversations with the Forest Queen have kind of revealed that, among other things, River's story is not there anymore. Like River's story has entirely unraveled and doesn't exist. What that means in terms of the Feywild, what happens to those characters that were in that story, and the creatures that lived in that story, we haven't revealed yet. But so that I've been intending uh, since since they rescued River. I obviously meant for them to rescue River. Them rescuing River was not surprising to me in the least. I would have been absolutely shocked if they had not rescued a child when she asked for for rescue. As to the other alleged bombshell, uh, the Forest Queen didn't say I don't know anything about that. I leave it to the viewer and to the player to interpret the Forest Queen's reaction to Shade's mark,
She
and how
technically said
much
that
you
she
trust
hasn't
it.
seen it on one of her people, right?
Mhm, right. Mhm.
Excuse me.
Um, she certainly didn't disavow it when Shade commented that you gave it to me and thank you and all of that. So I leave your opinion of the Forest Queen's trustworthiness up to you. So uh, that is as far as
Completely
I can take that
trustworthy.
answer. Hmm? Oh yeah, obviously. Laura,
I cannot
then
believe that you put that together in 2 hours.
yes, yeah.
I mean, obviously, I can believe it. That
I
is
mean,
insane.
I put the idea that I wanted River to be kidnapped by a Bandersnatch and for you guys to get attacked by Jub Jub birds. And then I had enough time to find on D&D Beyond on the home there's a homebrew section, and I found a version of Jub Jub birds and a version of a Bandersnatch that would suit both the level that you guys are at and um, the the basic idea of it that I liked. So I had time to pull essentially that encounter together. Um, the rest of it kind of improvised. I brought you guys to the Slithy Toves because I had brought Ari there, and so that was easy. I know I've got this swamp. I've referred to it as the Slithy Toves, and I've got um, my homage to Puddleglum the Marshwiggle from the Silver Chair in the figure of Ponderous living there that Ari encountered, and so I thought that would be fun. This will be the entry point back into the Feywild. Um, and you guys waking up the Tum Tum trees gave me the next thing, because obviously the Tum Tum trees are fey, and I just there decide, oh, of course the Tum Tum trees, like the Bandersnatch and the Jub Jub birds, are also somehow associated with the Laughing Lord, and so they would have some sort of characteristics that that name sounds like it would have. And so it just sort of, the things you guys did kind of gave me what the next thing is and the next thing is, and it gave an opportunity to tease the presence of the Jabberwock. And that's kind of where I got. And then, just on the spur of the moment, I decided to burn down everything else I had kind of started to work out in my head by having you guys end up back on the bank with Ponderous at the end of the chase through the trees. And that left me needing to do something else. And so, in the sort of 15-minute break we took, I decided, okay, well, I'll get them to the Forest Queen and we can have a conversation with the Forest Queen. And in that conversation, I can figure out what the shape of the rest of this adventure is. Um, so a lot of times I will figure out where an adventure is going by essentially using my players to brainstorm where the rest of the adventure is going by having them talk to an NPC, who can then point them in a direction that I work out during that conversation. Um,
Wow.
so
The tum tum
That's
trees were terrifying. Yeah, yeah, no, those were so creepy.
I've always liked the Feywild to be fun and funny, but not to ever feel like someplace you'd want to move,
Mm.
like to feel unsafe. Um, and
Success,
obviously, yes, great, and obviously, real dark in places like with the Forgotten Prince when Ari was with the Forgotten Prince,
right?
taking it to the very dark side of the sort of Jim Henson Feywild with Labyrinth and that kind of thing. So yes. Laura in the context here asks, Philip, please promise to keep River safe and happy. Thank you. Listen, you guys have met River. She's very capable of keeping herself safe. The rest of it, I don't know. I can't really say happy necessarily, but she's very capable of keeping herself safe. Uh, and then Laura asks, Casey, where does Shade's idolization of the Forest Queen come from? It seems like her mark is a big part of it, the Queen having protected her by giving her this gift. If Shade ever came to accept, if Shade ever, I'm going to fix this question. If Shade ever came to learn that the Queen didn't give her her mark, how much would that change her perception of her, if at all?
her her idolization of the Forest Queen is definitely from her um, her years surviving in the forest on her own. So Shade, we now know, was thrown through time and just found in the forest, and that before finding that out, Shade just always thought that her family had dropped her and left her in the forest. And then she was found by a nomadic tribe. And once her mark, the first inkling of her mark, her nomadic tribe threw her out. They just left. And so Shade survived from about 7 years old till 13, 14, living in the forest on her own. And she credits all of that survival for the Forest Queen. And so that idolization of her is this is her, this is Shade's deity. This is who has given her hope when she was living in isolation and fear and survival. Um, and the mark she views as a gift for the Forest Queen, knowing that she would need
Mhm.
that. Shade is very good at compartmentalizing things, and so I think that I think that unless it was explicitly stated by the Forest Queen, that's not mine, I didn't do that, then Shade would absolutely continue to choose to believe that the mark is a gift from the Forest Queen. Um,
Yeah.
and even if the Forest Queen said something along, tried to deny it, it would still take Shade some convincing.
Mhm.
That is her understanding of her life and her mark and her survival in the forest. And so this is the entity, the being, the woman that has cared for her in a way that until she has met her found family is what you know parents would do. It's the only um, caretaker that she's experienced.
Yeah. I like this next question because I had a very different perception of this moment than apparently was the truth. Laura asks, "Did you expect Shade to get the riddle so quickly?" So I, so when you said, "Why is she talking in circles or about going in circles?" Um, I thought what had just happened was I said the riddle. Casey got the riddle. Casey came up with a way for Shade to stumble into the riddle because she didn't think it would make because you didn't think it would make sense for Shay to just get the riddle. But yesterday while we were recording, you said it wasn't that.
I'm glad it plays that way, and I appreciate that. um, that people think that I could get it that quickly. But as I shared with you and Colin yesterday, I lateral thinking puzzles and riddles, I either get really quickly and don't know why, or just miss the mark for a really long time and just um, keep passing it by. And so when you presented this riddle, my immediate thought was, oh my goodness, this is going to be a 45-minute episode of me of Casey trying to figure it out and not getting it and not being able to play Shade. I mean, um, and so when you presented this, that I was just trying to brainstorm. I was just trying to figure out where to start making the connections. Um, and the fact that it was it, I'm just so glad that I didn't sit here for 40 minutes going,
It was great. It
would
had
it,
that whole like
would it?
Bilbo in the caves thing where he just calls out, "I need more time," and that's the answer to the riddle.
Yes. So um, I'm glad that's the way it played.
Mhm.
Because I think if I had been confident in the answer and that's what it was, I think that's the way I would have chosen to play it anyways. But no, I was just hoping to start brainstorming to answer that riddle as soon as possible.
Oh man, it was so good. To answer, no, I didn't expect them to get it quite that fast. I was a little nervous about it, um, because I'd figured out I wanted to get them to the Forest Queen, and I needed some sort of riddle that would get them there, and so I I actually asked ChatGPT to give me a riddle, um,
That's
and
awesome.
I had to give it a couple different prompts before it gave me something useful, and I adjusted it slightly to get it to where I was confident it was pointing in the right direction without just overtly stating itself, because that was the problem with a bunch of them is they contained the answer in the in the rhyme. It was like uh and so that's how I came up with the riddle, because I'm really bad at that on my own. um but I had initially intended for you guys to get towards the queen by talking to Ponderous, but just none of the questions made sense to that you guys asked him made sense for him to point you that way. And the kind of personality that I've created there didn't seem like volunteering extra information is
Right.
Ponderous's way. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Ponderous to talk to him. Um, and so when you guys headed on, I interjected Thistle into it, and that worked much better as someone who would excitedly try and point you in the right direction. Um, and then that gave me the great, wonderful uh, scene of you guys trying to get Thistle to give you the useful information, and Thistle trying to get you to ask in the right way, which is I enjoyed that a lot.
I when when Thistle commented that it was the right answer, I was so worried that I broke the plan. Like, oh no, clearly that was supposed to take longer. Wait, sorry.
No, it was
But
perfect.
Thistle was fantastic.
Good.
Is fantastic.
Um, Laura asks if I have ever had to create an adventure so last minute before, and what was it like if you did? Um, yes, a long time ago, in the first long form campaign that I ran, the players were going on a jailbreak, and the person they were looking for, that they were trying to rescue, this jail was built on an island, and underneath the island, there were mines that the prisoners were used for in labor, and that's where the target was. And so I had the mines all mapped out, and I had all of the things prepared to run an adventure set in this underground setting. Um, and the player characters got there, and then the players, asked, tried to did a little bit of sneaking around, looking to get a hold of some sort of map of the prison. And okay, that makes sense. And so they did that. They got a hold of one, and I described the various levels of the prison, and the mines on the bottom, and I described it from the top down, so that the place they would go would be the last thing I mentioned. The top was the warden's office, and they all thought, well, the warden will know, and so they went up, and I had nothing. I
Oh
had
no.
nothing for the rest of this building. I had no map, no no idea of what's supposed to be up here. And so yes, that was I just entirely made it up along the way. And I mostly made it up of they looked for something, and if they rolled high enough, that thing was there. And I just made it up, and I just let them kind of create the dungeon for me. Uh and then they got to the top, and I pulled a stat block out for the warden, and they murdered the warden. And stole the information, and then learned that they needed to go all the way back down to get to the mines. And so eventually they got back to the adventure I had planned. But yes, I have had to do that before. It was very nerve wracking. It
I
went okay,
bet.
but it was very nerve wracking. It was not nearly so fun as this Feywild adventure, um, because apparently it's Feywild is improvising. The Feywild is just okay. What piece of fantasy that I have in my head will I now just pull into this story? So yeah. Um, Emily asks, Casey, if you could only save one, Cal or River?
I can't answer that. Um, in that situation, I, I mean, I think my first thought is, well, I could save Cal, and then Cal would save River, so just
There you
cheat
go.
that way. Um, but then, other than our first initial interaction with River, um, she mostly doesn't need saving. Um, Obviously, we will get her from the Laughing Lord because it's not okay to kidnap people. Um, but she
It's
is
like one of y'all's primary rules.
right. We
Core value of
mostly
the
don't
Strike
kidnap
Force.
people. Um, and so I think, oh, I love them both so much. But I think Cal, because River is much more powerful than Cal is.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so she can get herself out. Or Cal and I would just, of course, team up to save her, as we are
Sure.
doing.
Right. Once you've got Cal. Yeah. Uh, and who would you rather have to deal with? Ponderous, Puzzle Dust, or Thistle?
I feel strongly about this one. Thistle, Thistle. She, although not direct, at least seems to want to be helpful. Puzzle just has no interest in being helpful,
It's true.
and I just need Ponderous to be read at like 1.5 speed.
Yeah. Then he wouldn't be. Uh,
Right.
Laura asks, also, can y'all do a one shot and play Ponderous, Puzzle Dust, and Thistle? Uh, I don't know. Which of my bizarre Fey NPCs are these players going to have to embody?
But also it would be so much fun.
That's true. Oh my gosh, that would be ridiculous.
Nothing would get done.
Oh no. No,
I mean,
nothing
not
would
that
get
a
done.
ton gets done with us currently, but
I don't know. You stick Pog and Shade alone, and it's go for adventure.
you take a river away from us,
That's
and it
true.
is very clear.
Yeah.
I will blur the lines of what is okay and isn't to get her back.
Well, good. Um, Laura asks me, "What's up with the Laughing Lord wanting a child for his queen?" Um, Man, you guys took all of the things that have happened and went in the darkest possible directions. The Forest Queen isn't trustworthy enough. Like all this. Anyway, I have been trying to present that River's not a child. I think two or three times as we've been going on since we rescued River, I've you guys will go a little while without talking to her and then come talk to her, and I will mention she's grown a lot. She doesn't look
Hmm.
nearly as childlike. And I think most recently she's taller than Shade now. She's looking not childlike at all. She's looking more like a young adult. River's age is a function of story. River existed in a story. River came into existence in a story as a child. She has no functional age. She came into existence as a child. She was never born, actually. Like the story, the Once Upon a Time thing said she was born, but that story comes into existence, and that's River. River is started life at that age and had been that age for however long that story has been around. So when the players pull River out of the world, she's no longer operating by the rules that she was created to operate by, and is able to change for the first time that she's ever changed. And I've been presenting her as aging rather rapidly, and I intend to go somewhere with that. But yeah, so not a child, not a child. Um, River has been growing very quickly in maturity, and numerical age has absolutely no meaning for a Fae. So we can't say, but River is only X number of years old, because that doesn't have any conceptual meaning in the Feywild. As to why the Laughing Lord wants her as a queen, I am hopefully that will become clear as the story progresses. But it has not yet been made clear because we haven't gotten to the Laughing Lord. So if that's been what my intention is. So I wasn't trying to present anything super dark and creepy in this, beyond the usual Feywild dark and creepy kind ofness. But um, so yes, so if that's how it came across, that was not my intent. Um, my intent is that we understand that River's not and never actually was a child in the sense that we mean that word. So yeah. And then Savage Artificer has a question for me, a question for you. Question for me, Philip. I really enjoy your portrayal of the Fae. Oh, that's not a question, but I like it. Um, that the characters had to know the answer to the riddle to move on was a very Fae-like thing to do. I know in a lot of folklore, Fae seem to think that giving information is a form of gift that requires something of those receiving it, similar to Ari and the Forgotten Prince's interactions. Did you forego this type of thing in this scenario to help progress the story faster, or do you like to have only certain Fey creatures behave in this manner? Um, Fey creatures do behave in a manner according to their story, not in a manner according to Fey. There's no in the way that I usually play the Feywild. There's no particular way that a Fey will behave. A Fey will behave according to the rules of its story. Archfey are like the Forgotten Prince or the Forest Queen, are hazardous because their story doesn't exactly have rules the way a Fae like the Mother Dryad's story creates rules that she's going to operate by. But also, I don't think I really did forego that. the Forest Queen, I mean, this is absolutely not the way I'm sure Shade, who's definitely going to put the best possible face on everything the Forest Queen says, read
Yeah.
it. But what the Forest Queen said is not, I can only open a path into the Laughing Lord's domain if you kill the Jabberwock. What she said was, I will open a path into the Jabberwock, into the Laughing Lord's domain if you kill the Jabberwock. Like, they went to the Forest Queen, and the Forest Queen gave them a quest to accomplish, upon which her help seems to be contingent. You can read that as, because things are going wrong in the Feywild, she can't do it until they take care of this. Or you can read that as, she will be willing to do it after you've done her this favor. So it's not as stark or obvious, because I don't want the Forest Queen's moral status to seem obvious, because she is the forest, and the forest doesn't really have a moral quality. And so her story is about wildness and wilderness, and doesn't have that kind of ethical quality. Whereas the Feywild's, the Forgotten Prince's story is about bitterness and loss. And so he will choose to be cruel, um, when it suits him. And so seeking something for the Forgotten Prince, and him taking something in return, or taking something to ensure that you do what he wants, the way he did Ari's half elf nature. Um, it's very different, because they have different stories, but both of them require that something be done for them before they'll do what you asked. It's just a matter of whether you interpret the Forest Queens as a, I need you to do this before you do that, or I will only do what you ask for after you've done this thing that I ask for.
Obviously, she needed that. Like, that was a step in providing that service.
Of course. Of course. That's obviously what it was. Uh, Last question, and it's for Casey. How did Shade take the news that her friend's heroic actions to save River destabilized a whole plane of existence? And knowing the consequences of their actions, would she do it again?
She is mostly trying not to think about it,
Mhm.
because there isn't. She currently can't be convinced that saving River was bad, and so there's this cognitive dissonance of how can you do a good thing and there still be consequences to it. That that doesn't compute.
Mm,
And so I think any time she starts thinking maybe that was wrong in her mind, she's just going, okay, but we saved River and that was the right thing. Like I can stand firm on that being the right thing.
right. Yeah.
Uh, and it's but we see this happening a lot where Shade's simplicity in her decision making process is understandably starting to be questioned, that things aren't that clear and there isn't clear good, bad, black, white, um, that people are complicated and situations are nuanced. And so
Ugh.
I, right. And so I'm glad it's in there because I think that is one of those, she cares about the Feywild and River. And so I think that's one of those things that'll help her to start seeing the complexities in those types of situations. But as of now, it's just blind, blind to
Yeah, it really, like, uh, and obviously I'm not going to tell anyone what's going on in the next episode, because it's a really good one. I'm super happy with the next episode. But I didn't mean it this way. I kind of meant this is, we'll have a really fun and goofy time in the Feywild, and obviously that's happening. Um, but it has also turned into some cool opportunities for Shade and Pog to exercise some character growth in different ways, both in the way that they see things that have happened and the way that they deal with situations. Because, well, partly because I think um, it's very much in their character to rely on the savvier members of the strike force when they're in difficult situations, because Ezri and Ari are smart, and they're educated smart, not just canny or something like that. And so uh, pulling those two away, or having those two gone from this adventure, and making Shade and Pog deal with situations, and not just situations that they can solve by stabbing things, is has been a lot more than I expected it to be, because I have such excellent players. Um, like, it's been a lot of fun to see the ways in which you and Colin have seized on some of the things that are happening, and have happened and will happen in order to reflect some development in the characters, and I'm really enjoying that. So I hope our viewers are, and you guys have told me very much that you are. So I'm glad that's true also.
It has been a blast. Yeah, Colin, this next episode, gosh, Colin is so good.
Hmm.
But it's been, and the viewers, y'all pointed out like just how the dynamics were going to shift, and curious about what that's going to look like. And it's been fun working through that.
Yeah.
If for Pug and Shade, we leave a lot of the decision making up to people we trust, so
Hmm.
that in part we don't have to defend our actions, because Ari said so or Esri said so, and so that has been very very interesting, and fun to sort of play around with and try to navigate what that looks like when the decision making is on their shoulders.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, that is all of our questions. Thank you all so much for these great questions.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Um, I can predict with great confidence that I will try to get Colin on for the next one. And I expect you will have some interesting questions for him then as well, because it's a good one. But for the time being, if you want to submit questions for Kyber Shards Answers, you can do so on our Discord, link to which is in the description. You can also let us know your thoughts on these things, or follow up, or offer us follow up questions in the comments down below. And you find links to all of our social media down in the description. And new episodes of Kyber Shards will drop on Monday. Kyber Shards Answers on Friday. And until next time, thanks for rolling with us.